It was a crisp autumn afternoon when we decided to explore the infamous abandoned mansion on the outskirts of town. The once grand estate had stood vacant for decades, its grandeur and beauty slowly being consumed by the passing of time. The locals avoided the place, whispering tales of curses and unexplained occurrences that kept even the bravest souls at bay. We, however, were not ones to believe in such superstitions. As we approached the mansion, a shiver ran down my spine. The air was heavy with an eerie silence, as if the very trees themselves were watching us. The once manicured lawn had grown wild and overgrown, with weeds pushing through the cracks of the crumbling pavement. The mansion loomed before us, its windows like empty eyes staring back. We gathered around the entrance, a massive wooden door adorned with rusted hinges and a heavy iron knocker in the shape of a snarling lion's head. The door creaked ominously as we pushed it open, revealing a dark and musty hallway that stretched into the depths of the mansion like a cold, unforgiving grave. Our group consisted of 5 friends: Emma, our fearless leader; Mike, the thrill seeker; Sarah, the skeptic; Jack, the history buff; and me, Alex. We had all been friends since high school, and this was our last hurrah before we went our separate ways. The mansion seemed like the perfect place to end our friendship on a high note. As we stepped inside, the door creaked shut behind us, enveloping us in an oppressive silence. We exchanged nervous glances, but our excitement and curiosity soon took over. "This is it," Emma whispered, her voice barely audible over the sound of our own ragged breathing. "We're really doing this." Little did we know that we were about to embark on a journey into the very heart of madness. As we ventured deeper into the mansion, our initial excitement began to give way to a growing sense of unease. Every creak of the floorboards, every groan of the old wooden beams made us jump. We tried to brush it off as the product of an overactive imagination, but deep down, I knew we were all thinking the same thing: we shouldn't be here. The air grew thick with dust and the stench of decay. Cobwebs clung to our faces like sticky fingers, and the flickering flashlights cast eerie shadows on the walls. It was as if the mansion itself was alive, watching us, waiting for us to make a wrong move. Sarah, ever the skeptic, tried to keep our spirits high with stories of rational explanations for the strange occurrences. But even she couldn't hide the fear that crept into her voice as we explored room after room of dusty antiques and faded portraits. As we delved deeper into the mansion, the rooms began to blur together in a haze of confusion. Doors led to more doors, hallways branched off in unexpected directions, and we found ourselves lost in a labyrinthine maze of corridors. It was as if the mansion had designed us to be disoriented, to make us question our own sanity. I caught Mike staring at something on the wall, his eyes fixed on a faded portrait with an unnerving intensity. "What's wrong?" I asked him, but he just shook his head and turned away. We didn't need to know what was bothering him. We all knew. The group's dynamics began to fray, our usual banter and jokes replaced by nervous laughter and hushed whispers. Emma tried to keep us focused, but even her leadership couldn't stem the tide of madness that threatened to consume us all. As night began to fall, casting long shadows across the walls, we realized we were running out of options. We had to find a way out, but every door led to more questions, and every window refused to budge. The mansion seemed determined to keep us trapped in its depths, where the lines between reality and nightmare blurred into nothingness. And then there was the noise. At first, it was just a faint whispering in the distance, but it grew louder with each passing moment until we could make out words. "Get out while you still can." We didn't need any further encouragement. We turned to leave, but as we reached for the door handle, I felt a hand on my shoulder. "You shouldn't have come here," a voice whispered in my ear, sending shivers down my spine. "Now you'll never leave." As we stood frozen in terror, the voice seemed to come from all around us, echoing off the walls. We tried to shake off the feeling of unease, telling ourselves it was just our imagination playing tricks on us. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. This mansion had a dark history, one that we were about to uncover. We took a tentative step forward, trying to make sense of what was happening. Emma pulled out her phone and began to snap pictures of the walls, hoping to find some clue as to who or what was speaking to us. Mike tried to shatter the spell with a joke, but even he couldn't hide the fear in his voice. "What do you think is going on here?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Do you guys think this house is haunted?" I hesitated, unsure of how to answer. Part of me wanted to say yes, that we were dealing with something supernatural and beyond our understanding. But another part of me wanted to dismiss it as mere fantasy, that we were just losing our minds in the isolation. "Let's get out of here," Jack said finally, his voice firm but laced with a hint of panic. "We can't stay here forever." But I couldn't shake off the feeling that we were being watched. The eyes seemed to be following us, watching our every move. And then I saw it, a photograph on the wall, showing a family standing in front of this very mansion. They were smiling and happy, but there was something unsettling about their smiles. "What's this?" Emma asked, her finger tracing over the image. "Looks like they lived here back in the 1920s. I felt a chill run down my spine as I gazed at the photograph. There was something about that family that seemed off. And then I saw it, a figure standing just behind them, lurking in the shadows. "Who is this?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I shook my head, unsure of how to answer. "I don't know, but I think we're about to find out." We continued to explore the mansion, determined to uncover its secrets. But as we delved deeper into the past, we began to realize that some wounds ran too deep, and that some secrets were better left unspoken. As we turned a corner, we stumbled upon a room that seemed frozen in time. The furniture was still intact, but everything else had been erased. The clock stopped at 11:45, the calendars torn off the walls, and the photographs scattered on the floor like confetti. "What happened here?" Mike asked, his voice laced with awe. "It looks like a scene from a horror movie." I felt a shiver run down my spine as I gazed upon the room. Something about it seemed personal, like someone had been trying to send us a message. And then we saw it, a small note on the floor, scribbled in red ink. "They're still here." We knew then that we were not alone in this mansion, and we knew that we had to get out before it was too late. We tried to shake off the feeling of unease as we continued to explore the mansion, but every step felt like a betrayal, as if we were being watched by unseen forces. The air was thick with tension, and I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. \n. \n. It started with small things, doors creaking open by themselves, objects moving on their own. We tried to tell ourselves it was just the old house settling, but deep down we knew better. Something was playing tricks on us, and it wasn't just our imagination. \n. As we made our way through the darkening halls, I began to feel a creeping sense of dread. It started with a tingling sensation in my fingers, like ants crawling up my skin. Then, it spread to my toes, making me feel like I was walking on hot coals. The sensation was intense, but I couldn't quite put my finger on what was causing it. \n what's going on? Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I can feel something too. I know, Mike replied, his eyes scanning the shadows. It feels like we're being watched. \n we exchanged nervous glances, our hearts pounding in unison. The darkness seemed to be closing in around us, making it hard to breathe. I tried to shake off the feeling, telling myself it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. But the sensation only grew stronger until I felt like I was being pulled apart at the seams. \n let's get out of here, Jack said finally, his voice firm but laced with desperation. Now. But as we turned to leave, we were met with a sight that made our blood run cold. A figure stood in front of us, its face twisted into a grotesque grin. The eyes glowed like embers, and the skin was deathly pale. \n who are you? Emma asked, her voice trembling. The figure didn't respond. Instead, it reached out a bony hand and touched my forehead. I felt a jolt of electricity run through my body, making me feel like I was being ripped apart at the molecular level. The sensation was intense, but I couldn't quite process what was happening. \n as the figure withdrew its hand, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A message was etched into my forehead in red ink. You should not have come here. We stumbled backward, our eyes fixed on the figure in horror. It didn't move, didn't speak. It just stood there, watching us with an unblinking gaze. \n what do we do? Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I shook my head, unsure of how to answer. We were trapped in this mansion, at the mercy of forces beyond our understanding. And I knew that if we didn't get out soon, we would never escape. As we stood frozen in terror, the figure's grip on my forehead seemed to loosen. I took a deep breath and tried to clear my mind, focusing on the present moment. The darkness around us began to recede, and I saw that the others were staring at me with a mixture of fear and desperation. What did it say? Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I hesitated, unsure of how to answer. The message on my forehead still seared itself into my brain, but as I looked around, I saw something that gave me a glimmer of hope. The figure had taken a step back, its eyes fixed on us with an unnerving intensity. But in that moment, I saw something else, a flicker of curiosity in its gaze. What if it's not here to harm us? Mike said suddenly, his voice laced with doubt. I turned to him, surprised by the suggestion. Maybe it's trying to communicate with us, I replied, my mind racing with possibilities. The others exchanged skeptical glances, but I could see the faintest spark of hope in their eyes. We took a collective deep breath and began to move forward, our senses on high alert as we navigated the treacherous halls. As we walked, I noticed that the atmosphere around us was changing. The air seemed lighter, less oppressive, and the shadows cast by the flickering candles appeared more like wispy tendrils of fog rather than dark tentacles. Suddenly, a door creaked open on its own, revealing a room filled with books and ancient artifacts. The figure watched us from the doorway, its eyes gleaming with an otherworldly intelligence. Welcome to the library, it said in a voice that was both familiar and yet utterly alien. I've been waiting for you. The others gasped in unison, their faces pale with fear. But I stood tall, my heart pounding with excitement. Maybe, just maybe, we had stumbled upon something incredible, a doorway to understanding the mysteries of this mansion. What do you want from us? Emma asked, her voice trembling but resolute. The figure smiled, its lips curling upwards in a slow, deliberate movement. "I want to show you the secrets of this place," it replied, its eyes glinting with mischief. "And maybe, just maybe, I can help you find your way out." As we followed the figure deeper into the mansion, I couldn't shake off the feeling that we were walking further into a dream world. The walls seemed to melt and distort around us, like wax in a furnace. Every step felt like a betrayal, as if we were surrendering to some dark force that lurked just beyond the edge of perception. The others seemed to be slipping further into madness with each passing moment. Emma's eyes had taken on a wild, animalistic glint, and Mike's face was set in a grim, determined expression. Sarah stumbled along beside me, her voice barely above a whisper as she murmured strange incantations under her breath. I felt like I was losing my grip on reality. The line between what was real and what was just a product of our fevered imaginations had begun to blur beyond recognition. Was the figure leading us towards some hidden truth, or was it simply manipulating us for its own twisted purposes? As we turned a corner, the room seemed to expand and contract around us like a living entity. The walls dissolved into a swirling vortex of colors, and I felt myself being pulled inexorably towards the center. The figure stopped in front of me, its eyes blazing with an otherworldly intensity. "This is where the truth begins," it said, its voice like a rusty gate creaking in the wind. And then everything went white. When I came to, I was lying on the floor, my head throbbing with pain. The others were scattered around me, their faces twisted into expressions of horror and confusion. "What happened?" Emma asked, her voice trembling as she stumbled towards me. I tried to sit up, but a wave of dizziness washed over me, forcing me back onto the floor. "I don't know," I admitted, my mind reeling with fragmented images and disjointed memories. But as I looked around, I saw something that made my blood run cold. The figure was standing in front of us, its eyes gleaming with a malevolent light. And behind it, on the wall opposite, was scrawled a message in letters that seemed to shift and writhe like living serpents. "You should not have come here." The line between reality and nightmare had blurred beyond recognition. We were trapped in a world of madness, where the boundaries between dreams and nightmares were indistinguishable. And I knew that we would never escape. As the message on the wall seemed to sear itself into our minds, we knew we had to act fast. We couldn't let ourselves become trapped in this never-ending nightmare forever. We scrambled to our feet, our eyes fixed on the figure standing before us. It was as if it had been waiting for us all along, its presence radiating an aura of malevolent intent. Without a word, we turned and sprinted down the hallway, our footsteps echoing off the walls in a mad dash for freedom. The figure gave chase, its long strides eating up the distance between us. As we ran, I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The others were struggling to keep up, their faces set in determined expressions as they fought against the exhaustion that threatened to consume them. I dared not look back, fearing what I might see. Instead, I kept my eyes fixed on the door ahead, praying that it would open soon and lead us out of this accursed place. But just when we thought we were nearing the end of our journey, the hallway seemed to stretch on forever, leading us in circles through a maze of twisting corridors and dark, narrow passages. The figure was always one step behind, its presence seeming to grow stronger with every passing moment. In desperation, I reached into my pocket and felt for the small key that I had found earlier. It was all we had left to cling to, our last hope for escape. With a surge of adrenaline, I flung open the door at the far end of the hallway, revealing a narrow stairway that plunged down into darkness. Without hesitation, I led the others downstairs, our footsteps fading into the abyss as we plunged deeper into the depths of the mansion. But even as we descended, I couldn't shake off the feeling that we were being herded towards some terrible fate, that the figure was manipulating us towards a final, merciless confrontation. The line between reality and nightmare had blurred beyond recognition, and I knew that our only hope for survival lay in finding a way to shatter the spell that held us captive. As we reached the bottom of the stairs, I saw a glimmer of light up ahead, a faint beam of illumination that seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy. It was as if we were being drawn towards some ancient power, one that could either save us or consume us entirely. With a sense of trepidation, I led the others forward, our footsteps echoing off the walls as we approached the source of the light. And then, in an instant, everything went black. As we stumbled forward, the light grew brighter, illuminating a vast underground chamber filled with a twisted, nightmarish landscape. The air was thick with the stench of decay and corruption, and I could feel the weight of the mansion's dark history bearing down upon us like a physical force. The others stumbled forward, their faces pale and drawn, their eyes fixed on some unseen horror. Emma let out a blood-curdling scream as she stumbled upon a figure made entirely of rotting flesh, its eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. Mike tried to run, but his feet seemed rooted to the spot. He was transfixed by a vision of his own death, played out in vivid detail before our very eyes. Sarah screamed and fell to the ground, her body contorting into impossible positions as if she were being twisted apart from the inside out. I stumbled forward, my mind reeling with terror. I had to get them out of here, had to find a way to escape this living hell. But every step felt like a betrayal, as if I was leading us further into the heart of madness. And then we saw it, the source of the light, the power that seemed to be driving us deeper into this twisted world. It was an altar, surrounded by candles and strange artifacts that seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy. In the center of the altar, a figure sat in darkness, its presence radiating an aura of unspeakable evil. The others were frozen in place, unable to move or speak. I was the only one who could act, the only one who could try and stop whatever horrors lay ahead. But as I approached the altar, I felt a sense of dread creeping over me. This was it, the moment of truth. Would we survive this living hell, or would we be consumed by its darkness? As I approached the altar, I felt a sense of dread creeping over me. The figure in darkness seemed to be pulsing with an otherworldly energy, and I could feel its malevolent presence washing over me like a wave. I tried to speak, but my voice was caught in my throat. I tried to move, but my legs were frozen in place. The others were still trapped, unable to break free from the spell that held them captive. Emma was screaming again, her voice echoing off the walls as she was dragged deeper into the depths of madness. Mike's eyes had gone blank, his expression frozen in a mask of terror. Sarah was thrashing about on the ground, her body convulsing with spasms as if she were being attacked from within. I knew I had to act fast, or risk losing them all forever. With a surge of adrenaline, I launched myself at the altar, determined to break the spell that held us captive. But as I reached out to touch the figure in darkness, I felt a jolt of electricity run through my body. The world around me began to distort and twist, like a reflection in rippling water. I stumbled backwards, my eyes wide with shock. The others were still trapped, but they seemed different. Their eyes had changed, their expressions twisted into grotesque grins. Emma was laughing now, her voice shrill with maniacal glee. Mike's eyes were glowing with an otherworldly light, his face contorted in a snarl of rage. Sarah was dancing, her body moving in jerky, unnatural rhythms as if she were being controlled by some unseen force. I knew then that we had crossed a threshold, that there was no going back. We were deeper into the heart of madness now, and there was no escape. The figure in darkness seemed to be laughing, its presence growing stronger with every passing moment. I felt myself being drawn towards it, like a moth to flame. And then everything went black. As I emerged from the darkness, I found myself back in the mansion's grand hall. The others were standing around me, their eyes blank and expressionless. Emma's smile had returned, but it was twisted and cruel. Mike's eyes still glowed with an otherworldly light. Sarah danced to some unheard music, her movements jerky and unnatural. I knew then that we had been changed forever, that the darkness within us had been unleashed. The others began to close in on me, their faces twisted with a hunger for my soul. I raised my hands, palms outwards, in a futile attempt to ward them off. But it was too late. The darkness within them was too strong, and it consumed me whole. I felt myself being pulled down into the depths of madness where the secrets of our past were waiting. The others laughed and jeered as I fell, their voices echoing through eternity. And then I saw it. A door hidden behind a tapestry, adorned with symbols of the occult. It was the entrance to the heart of the mansion's darkest secret. I knew that I had to open it no matter the cost. With a surge of determination, I reached out and turned the handle. The door creaked open, revealing a room filled with ancient artifacts and forbidden knowledge. In the center of the room, a single book lay open on a pedestal. Its pages were blank except for a single phrase scrawled in blood. "The truth is not for the living." I knew then that I had to read it, no matter what horrors lay within. The others watched as I approached the pedestal, their eyes fixed on me with a hungry gleam. But I didn't care. I had to know the truth, no matter how terrible it might be. With shaking hands, I reached out and touched the page. And then everything went black. As I read the words, the room around me began to distort and twist. The artifacts on the shelves seemed to writhe and squirm like living things, their symbols burning with an otherworldly fire. The air was filled with a maddening hum, like the buzzing of 1,000 bees. I felt my mind expanding, as if it were being stretched to its limits. The words on the page began to shift and change, rearranging themselves into a new message. Reality is not what it seems. Suddenly, the walls around me began to melt away, revealing a vast expanse of nothingness. I felt myself falling through the void, weightless and free. Below me, the mansion's grand hall stretched out like a canvas, its rooms and corridors unfolding like a maze. But something was wrong. The furniture seemed to be shifting and flowing like a liquid, as if it were made of some strange, amorphous material. I saw myself walking through the halls, but my body was not quite right. My limbs were longer and more flexible, my senses heightened to an unnatural degree. I knew then that I had become something else entirely. Something else. The others watched me with a mixture of fascination and horror as I transformed before their eyes. Emma's face twisted into a grotesque parody of her former self, while Mike's eyes glowed with an otherworldly energy. Sarah's body stretched and contorted, twisting into impossible shapes. And I became something new entirely, a creature born of madness and terror, a being of pure chaos, unbound by the laws of reality itself. The mansion around me began to collapse, its walls crumbling into dust as the very fabric of space-time unraveled. And I laughed, for I knew that I was free. As I emerged from the chaos of the mansion's collapse, I found myself back in the grand hall. But this time, everything was different. The walls were gone, and the air was thick with an otherworldly energy. I could feel the presence of the sinister force that had driven us all mad, watching me from just out of sight. It began to take shape before my eyes, its form twisting and flowing like a living thing. Emma's face contorted in rage as she lunged at me with a knife. Mike's eyes blazed with an unnatural light as he summoned a storm of razor-sharp debris. Sarah's body stretched and contorted into impossible shapes, her limbs wrapping around me like a living noose. But I was not afraid, for I had become one with the chaos itself. My mind merged with the madness that had driven us all to this point. With a wave of my hand, the storm of debris died down and the others froze in place. The sinister force loomed before me, its presence suffocating, and then it spoke. Its voice was like thunder in my mind, shaking the foundations of reality itself. "You should not have come here," it growled. "Now you will never leave." I laughed, for I knew that I had the power to destroy it once and for all. With a burst of energy, I reached out and touched its presence. The world around me exploded in a blaze of light and sound, as if reality itself was being torn apart. And when the dust settled, the sinister force was gone, banished from existence forever. But at what cost? For as I stumbled forward, I realized that I was not myself anymore. I had been transformed by the madness, my mind shattered beyond repair. The last thing I saw was Emma's face, her eyes filled with a mixture of rage and despair as she whispered a single word: "No." And then everything went black.